Somewhere in the ancient world, a farmer wakes up in the dark, with no idea what time it is. No clock on the wall, no phone to check, not even a number to describe the moment he's living in. And yet he still has to know roughly when to plant, when to pray, when to meet others, and when to sleep. So how did ancient humans actually track time, hour by hour, day by day, without a single clock anywhere on Earth? Farmers needed to know when to plant before a season slipped away. Traders needed to agree on a shared moment to meet. Priests needed exact timing for rituals that couldn't simply happen whenever anyone felt like it. Without a shared way to measure time, none of that coordination was even possible. The very first clock humans ever used wasn't built. It was already hanging in the sky. The sun's position told a rough story on its own. Low and orange at dawn, high and sharp at midday, long shadowed again by evening. But position alone wasn't precise enough. Humans needed something that could actually measure the sun's movement, not just glance at it. So they built the simplest possible tool. A single stick, planted upright in the ground. As the sun moved across the sky, the stick's shadow swept slowly around it, shortening toward noon and stretching out again by evening. This simple shadow stick, called a gnomon, became humanity's first real timekeeping device. In Egypt, this idea grew into something enormous. Giant stone obelisks were built specifically to cast long, trackable shadows across entire public squares. Egyptian timekeepers also built smaller, portable shadow clocks, marked with hour lines, that could be repositioned as the sun rose higher through the day. In Babylon, a priest and astronomer named Berossus is credited with refining a hemispherical version of the sundial, a carved bowl shape that tracked the sun's path with far more consistent accuracy across the entire year, not just around noon. This eventually evolved into the sundial, a flat marked surface with a raised edge, where a single shadow could be read almost like a clock face. Some sundials even became small enough to carry. Wealthy Romans owned pocket-sized sundials, portable enough to check the hour while traveling between cities. But some ancient structures weren't built to track hours at all. They were built to track something much bigger, the turning of entire years. At sites like Stonehenge in England, certain stones align precisely with the sunrise on the summer solstice, marking the single longest day of the year with remarkable accuracy. Similar solar alignments appear in ancient structures built independently across the world, from Mesoamerica to ancient Egypt, each one a kind of massive, motionless calendar. Long before anyone could measure a single hour precisely, humans had already figured out how to measure an entire year, just by watching where the sun chose to rise. In Mesoamerica, the Maya pushed this idea even further, tracking celestial cycles precisely enough to build an extraordinarily accurate long-term calendar system, capable of tracking dates across thousands of years. Priests and astronomers recorded the movement of the sun, moon, and even the planet Venus, weaving those cycles into religious ceremonies, agricultural planning, and recorded history all at once. Two civilizations, on opposite sides of the planet, both realized the same thing, that tracking the sky wasn't just useful for the next hour. It could organize an entire society. But sundials had one obvious, unavoidable flaw. The moment the sun disappeared, whether behind clouds or below the horizon, the entire device became completely useless. No shadow meant no time, and roughly half of every single day, the night half, had no sun at all. So ancient humans looked for their next clock somewhere else entirely. Straight up, into the night sky itself. Egyptian priests developed detailed star charts, tracking specific groups of stars called decans as they rose one after another through the night. By watching which decan had just risen, trained observers could estimate roughly which hour of the night it actually was. It wasn't simple. It required years of training and a genuinely precise memory of the sky's slow nightly rotation. But for temple priests responsible for exact nightly rituals, this star-based system was, for a long time, the only real option available. Egyptian astronomers even built a dedicated tool for this exact purpose, called a merkit, a simple sighting instrument used alongside a plumb line to measure precisely when certain stars crossed a fixed point in the sky. Two priests, working together with two merkits, could line up a precise north-south sight line and time a star's crossing almost like a stopwatch made entirely of string and stone. This wasn't just ceremony either. In Egypt, the yearly reappearance of a single star, Sirius, on the horizon reliably predicted the Nile's flooding season, tying precise star watching directly to the survival of an entire harvest. Get that timing wrong, and an entire season of crops could fail. Get it right, and an entire civilization could plan its year around it. Eventually, humans realized the sun and stars weren't the only things that moved at a steady, predictable pace. Water did too. The water clock, known as a clepsydra, used a container with a small hole, letting water drip out at a roughly constant rate into a second marked container below. As the water level rose or fell, marked lines on the container let someone read off roughly how much time had passed. This one invention solved something sundials never could. It worked at night, indoors, and even on a completely cloudy day. Water clocks appeared independently in Egypt, Babylon, Greece, and China, each culture arriving at nearly the same idea without ever meeting each other. In Greek courtrooms, water clocks were even used to time how long a speaker was allowed to talk, timing justice itself, one drop at a time. Around the 3rd century BCE, Greek inventor Ctesibius improved the design dramatically, adding a floating dial connected to gears, so the water clock could display time almost automatically, without anyone needing to read shifting water lines by hand. It was, in a real sense, one of the earliest machines built specifically to automate the reading of time itself. But water clocks had their own hidden flaw. Water doesn't flow at exactly the same speed in every condition. Cold water moves slower. Warm water moves faster. In freezing climates, the water could stop moving entirely, freezing solid and stopping time altogether. Humans needed something that didn't care about temperature at all. One answer came from something that burned at a steady, predictable pace of its own. Fire, shaped into a very specific tool. The candle clock used evenly spaced marks along a candle's length. As it burned down, hour by hour, each past mark meant another hour gone. In China, a related idea used incense instead of wax, calibrated sticks or elaborate carved incense seals that burned along a fixed, known path. Some incense seals were pressed into an intricate maze-like groove, so a single stick of incense could smolder for many hours in a compact, decorative shape, instead of one long straight stick. Some incense clocks were even built with small threads holding metal balls above a bell. When the incense burned through a thread, the ball dropped, ringing out the hour on its own. For the first time, a clock didn't just show time, it could actually announce it, completely on its own. In England, King Alfred the Great is said to have used marked candles divided into sections to structure his entire day, reportedly protecting the flame from drafts inside a thin panel of horn, an early version of a lantern. Even a king, it turns out, needed exactly the same basic tool as anyone else to structure a day, just wrapped in a slightly nicer case. But fire-based clocks had a problem of their own. Wind, drafts, and rain could all interfere with an open flame. At sea, this problem became impossible to ignore. No sailor could rely on an open flame, or even flowing water, on a constantly rocking ship, so sailors turned to a completely sealed solution. Fine sand, falling steadily through a narrow neck between two glass bulbs. The hourglass didn't care about wind, rain, or rocking waves. Sand fell at the same rate no matter how rough the sea got. Ship crews flipped hourglasses on a strict rotating schedule to track work shifts, a system that quietly shaped the very idea of a sailor's watch. Here's the strange part. Despite how simple it looks, the hourglass is actually one of the later inventions in this entire story. Building one required surprisingly precise glassmaking, two evenly matched, perfectly sealed bulbs joined by a narrow neck, technology that simply didn't reliably exist until medieval Europe. So while sand itself had been sitting around for the entire span of human history, the tool to actually use it properly had to wait for glassmaking to catch up first. While Europe leaned on sand and wax, another part of the world was building something far more precise. In the Islamic world, the astrolabe became one of the most advanced timekeeping tools of the ancient and medieval era, using the position of stars and the sun to calculate precise time and direction. Mosques employed dedicated timekeepers, called muwaqqits, whose entire job was calculating the exact moments for each of the day's 5 prayers using instruments like this. In the 12th century, engineer Al-Jazari built extraordinary water-powered clocks, some shaped like castles, using elaborate mechanisms to mark the hours automatically with moving figures and sound. These weren't simple timekeeping tools anymore. They were genuine engineering achievements, centuries ahead of anything most of the world had ever built before. One of Al-Jazari's most famous creations, the elephant clock, combined a water-powered mechanism hidden inside a life-sized model elephant, with a Mahout figure on top striking a symbol automatically to mark each passing half hour. It combined engineering from Greece, Persia, India, and China all into a single working machine, a genuine symbol of how connected ancient timekeeping knowledge really was. Meanwhile in China, a similar leap was happening on an even larger scale. This wasn't even China's first attempt. Centuries earlier, in the 2nd century, astronomer Zhang Heng had already built a water-powered armillary sphere, using a steady water flow to rotate a model of the sky in sync with the real stars above. It was an early proof that flowing water could be trusted to drive something far more complex than a simple dripping clock. In the 11th century, engineer Su Song built an enormous astronomical clock tower, powered by a water wheel linked to an early escapement mechanism that regulated its movement with real precision. The tower featured moving figures that emerged automatically to mark the hours, along with a rotating armillary sphere for tracking the stars above. In many ways, this stood as one of the earliest true mechanical clocks in the world, centuries before anything similar appeared in Europe. In medieval Europe, for a long stretch of time, timekeeping wasn't really about hours or minutes at all. It was about bells. Monasteries rang bells at set points through the day and night, calling monks to prayer at fixed canonical hours, whether or not anyone could see the sun. These fixed prayer times even had their own names, hours like matins before dawn, vespers at dusk, dividing the entire day into a rhythm shared by the whole community, clock or no clock. This need for reliable, repeatable bell ringing quietly pushed European engineers towards something genuinely new, a fully mechanical clock. By the 1300s and 1400s, a mechanism called the verge escapement allowed a set of falling weights to drive gears forward at a steady, controlled pace. These early clocks were mounted in church towers across European towns, often with just a single-hour hand, since minutes still weren't considered important enough to track. For the first time in human history, an entire town could check the same mechanical time, together, at a glance. Over the following centuries, these mechanisms kept shrinking, gaining a minute hand, then eventually becoming small enough to wear on a chain, and finally small enough to strap directly onto a wrist. Even the word clock traces back to this exact era, borrowed from an old word for bell, a quiet reminder that mechanical timekeeping and ringing bells were, for centuries, the exact same invention. Stop and compare these two realities for a second. An ancient priest, watching a specific cluster of stars rise, trained for years just to estimate which hour of the night it might be. Today, you glance at your wrist, or your phone, and know the exact second, without a single thought. The core need never actually changed across that entire span of time. Humans have always needed to know where they stand inside a day. What changed was every layer built to answer that need. A shadow on the ground, a drop of water, a burning line on a candle, falling sand, a rotating gear, and finally, a number glowing quietly on a screen. Maybe that's the real thread running through this story. Time itself never changed for a single moment. Humans just kept building better ways to make sure they were never lost inside it. If you found it interesting how humans measured something completely invisible using nothing but shadows, water, fire, and sand,